Welcome to David's Rebel Coding Podcast. So in this episode, we are going to work on our wine store shopping cart. And what we want to do is be able to have an administrator user be able to log in and change the price or inventory of the wines that are on selection for sale in the shopping cart application. So it sounds like it'd be pretty simple, right? I mean, it's just one function call essentially that can save the JSON record to the database. How hard could it be? It shouldn't be that difficult. Now, I asked Google, like a company in Canada, if I were to contract a software company to build me a basic inventory management, supplier management, order management, reporting and analytics web application, it would cost estimate between $10,000 and $50,000. So let's take the low end of that spectrum. Let's start the timer and see if we can just create a basic edit page for our wine products, which is part of the inventory tracking. I guess it would be the first bullet point on the list for basic features. So to begin, we just let's start the timer. Okay, so a little bit of basic syntax that goes into Java extensible templates. So those are JXTs. You can nickname them as JET because the first letter of each word can spell out the word JET. So it's just a kind of a marketing thing. So basically here, if we look at the basic loop template, so what we're dealing with here is that once you've bound some data in the view controller to the template, then you can access the data directly in the DOM, which makes the application that you're writing considered enterprise grade, scalable, and faster to development, more efficient, and just all around good practice. Like your business will be basically the best that it can be for managing business requirements and developing a web application because it's using model view controller design pattern. Now I find with the React template world, they discourage that in a way because when you start out of the box, they've got the JavaScript blended right in with the HTML DOMs. So the temptation is you just jump in and start putting business requirements directly in the template. And I think that's a mistake. You have to discipline yourself to separate out into a separate file the business logic. And I would argue many people don't take that extra step. They just jump in and start coding right away, since most of the examples kind of work that way as well. So but in JXT, it's sort of forced upon you. You have to bind separately. It's done separately. So this is just the rendering of the template that we're looking at. If you want to do an if-then-else statement, some people don't realize, but you have this question mark and then the colon. So this means if the user role is an administrator, then you do this part. User is an admin. Else, so this colon means else, the user is not an admin, then do this part. So it separates two it's conditional logic that you can embed into your template. Here's our bread and butter, is basically being able to loop through an array collection of JSON elements, and in this case it's a wine object. And then what we're doing here is we're doing a dynamic introspection of that wine object to pull out its attributes. So like the title, the price, and then in the future, if we were to add another attribute, we wouldn't have to change this form. It's dynamically figuring out what the attributes are and rendering the form accordingly. Here we have hard-coded, if it's a price, then I want to format the value differently and then display it in my template. So let's take a look at how we would do this. I'm going to create an inventory management module in our application, and then we'll take a look at what we can do here. So we're 3 minutes into this. Here's our wine shop. So we're going to go to our IDE, or integrated development environment. And if I look at the view controller, this is where we bind the data. So here we're going to call it inventory management, and then I'm basically going to add the user. So I have a function to get the logged in user. To do that, it's just doing a select on the underscore user table, and that will bring back the logged in user. And then after that, you can bind whatever data you want to this. This is called view binding, or like the view controller. So this is the part of the MVC where we're separating the data from the template engine, and we're binding the data to the template. And then we needed an intuitive way to be able to do that. In other languages like PHP, you have the server-side includes, which enable this functionality. And in the Java world, that's often done with something called L syntax, or Java JSP beans, bean binding. And so they're built into the technologies. Microsoft had a different way of doing it. They have two different ways of doing it. It was later in the game that they decided to adopt MVC, but before MVC, they did everything from the server side. So the server side .NET controls was how you built web applications traditionally using Microsoft technologies. So what this is going to do then is going to render this template with the data that we want. So if we want the user, because we bound the user here to the template, we can then access it. So let's look at building that template then. So for example, if I just want, I use this $sign and these curly brackets. So here we called it user. So if I want to find out what user role we're dealing with, as soon as I put that in, it renders out as the administrator. So in all caps, admin means admin. If I were to log in as a different user, you'd see that I was just a user in the other scenario. But right now I'm an admin, so we can have this screen. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to basically loop through my products and try to display them. So if I took like the basic double nested loop example, you can see that it will display, if I wanted to, the title, for example, of each wine. Actually, this will do the actually, I don't want to put this here. Let's put this here, and then you'll see you get the title of each wine, but then there is a key and a value. So for example, I could do key, and then I could do value. So any variables you create in this JavaScript section, you can bind to the inner template later. So here's the keys and values. I've got ID 26, title, shaver, description, smooth. So I basically just want to turn like the description into an edit box so that I can edit these things. So what I would do is you can just surround it into an edit box. So you get like, how do you make an edit box in just like vanilla JavaScript? So, or in HTML, I mean. So I'm just going to copy how to make an input box, and then you would turn every attribute into its own like input box. So here's an example. I'm just also going to need to get the reference to the control. So luckily I'm in kind of like a JavaScript area that I have access to, so I can just use the normal JavaScript that I would to be able to do that, to reference the control that's going to render the page. And this then allows me to access some functionality like being able to escape the HTML in the value. So this, if I had double quotes and single quotes, it would render perfectly and I wouldn't get an error because I'm calling the escape HTML function. Let's make sure I have everything here. And then, so this should just turn everything into a bunch of editable selections. So now theoretically, I can write a little JavaScript to get, for this particular bottles of wine, whichever element I click on, I can create a button that will get that bottle of wine. And I can encode that wine then into the button, so when I click the button, I have access to the JSON representation of that bottle of wine. And then from that, I can go and, based on the ID that I've defined here, I can go and query the form elements and build back that JSON object, so that when I click on a save button, I can then call the put JSON on our auth manager and then actually persist the save to the database. So let me show you what I mean. So that started out fairly simple, but then you could see that it became more complicated as I described all of the things that were necessary. So that will require a little kind of JavaScript section on the bottom. I'm also going to add an alert at the top of the screen so that we can see messages, because right now we don't have a separate messages class. You would idealistically want to put that in its own module, but for now we're just going to put it at the top. You see that the display is none on the message. And then we will have to look up the user role here. Hold on. So if the user role is an admin, we're then going to create this. We don't want them to be able to edit the IDs, because those are the primary keys of the wine bottle. It's what makes the wine unique. And then we're going to put a little validation in so that the user can then change the price. So we want to up this price to $14.13. If we hit edit, you'll see that we get that JSON representation with what we've entered. So it's $14.13. The fact that there's no errors here means that it's already come back from our application programming interface, and it's already persisted the change. So before I hit OK, if I went back to our actual website, you'll see that that 402 bottle of wine that used to be priced at $4 is now $14, and it's been reflected in the shopping cart. So we now have the basic back office functionality that's protected by whether the user is an administrator or not. And we've done it all in just about 10 minutes. We're in 12 minutes now. 3 minutes of description would put our time back down to under 10 minutes. So that works out to $1,000 a minute for the first bullet point of functionality. Now, if we're going to continue in the next episode, if you liked this video, you can click like and subscribe down below. And we're getting closer to finishing our shopping cart application, which will enable you to earn passive residual income and give you back time in your life to do the things that you want to do. So the days of being a wage slave are ending, and you can now have agency back into your life, and you're not always working for somebody else, living paycheck to paycheck. You've now accelerated your options, and you can restore the humanity back into what God born you for, which was not to be a wage slave. So anyways, if you like this video, click like and subscribe. Click down below. That was $1,000 a minute for that functionality. I hope you enjoyed it. And in the next video, we're going to put together the skeleton infrastructure for the menu control system for our back office functionality. So we're going to need to include a menu-driven system, because there's probably going to be more than one type of metric that we're tracking over time. And as we build this application, we were going to build more functionality into it. So it's going to be 10 minutes a day. And eventually, I think in a month, we'll have this application built. Click like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.